Boys, how you doing, Connor?
Great.
Oh man, I think that's a perfect way to describe.
I think so.
Oh man, fun stuff. I got the Hawaiian shirt on today. Figured, how's the weather near you?
It's not actually. It's kind of cold. It's like 70.
Kind of cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I don't know, man. Like right after Labor Day, it started getting cold here. So now it's like cold, rainy. Just like everyone's like starting to get in that depression, like winter mode, you know?
It's coming quick.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I got home and I was like, you know what? We're recording the show today. Got to be in a good mood. Let's put on the Hawaiian shirt. I'm at the beach right now, man. I'm at the beach.
You're good to go.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I am good to go. But yeah, so a lot going on, a lot happening in the space. I feel like every single time we reconnect each week, it's like, what next? You know?
Yeah. There's too much stuff. Well, we tried to like we mentioned it before, but we're saying that like there's so many people I think that want to come on talk to us. There's so many like projects and stuff, but there's just too much for us to talk about. I feel like so we're sorry to everyone involved that probably wants to get mentioned or come on or whatever, but there's only so much time that we have, so
we'll try and fit you in. We'll try. But we also want to do episodes like this too, you know, where we kind of do a deep dive. I won't give away what we're going to talk about yet, but we'll go into the projects first, because I think, you know, we put up that poll online on Twitter and got some good feedback, got a lot of responses. A lot of people want to learn about the different projects that are going on in the space. So I think, you know, we'll definitely try to cover more of that. So I think that's what we're going to do in the intro of today's show. So I guess, should we start with Pixel?
Yep. We will dive into the Pixel wallet. Is a wallet that has the ability to encrypt Bitcoin transactions into images. So what you can do is like I can send you just a PNG image or a JPEG or whatever, and then as long as you have the password, you can decrypt the image and take the Bitcoin. So that's pretty cool, because like I think it has a lot of use cases, but like the most obvious use case would be that you can kind of hide your Bitcoin in images. So if you had, you know, even on your own computer, you could store Bitcoin in a password protected image that no one would know there's Bitcoin inside of it. So that's like a pretty easy use case, but I think also just the cool idea of being able to send images and then have people like use a password to take Bitcoin out would be, there's a lot of, I think, interesting use cases there. And I think one of them also, you know, someone made a website, we'll put a link to it, but they create a website where inside of each image on their website, they embedded the password. So you kind of have to solve these little puzzles to take the passwords out of the images, and then you can use those passwords to take the Bitcoin. So I thought that was a pretty unique way of doing things, and it looks like they integrated the money button. Look at that. I'm not signed in. All right. Thought that would work. Anyway, so just a pretty cool idea, and a lot of different use cases I'm sure that you can see would emerge.
Awesome.
We wanted to talk about $5. So this is a Fiverr competitor, but everything they do is run on Bitcoin. So all the freelance work is done getting paid on top of Bitcoin Cash. So you can see here, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of just cool stuff on the website. It's like Fiverr.com. If you've ever seen that, you can just get things done for $5. Some people list for more than $5, but you know, I think we were looking at getting like a intro little jingle done on Fiverr, but we'll check $5 too. But yeah. So this is a cool marketplace for anything at all.
So yeah, if you want to do any freelance work, check out $5. Or if you're looking to get some freelance work done, check out $5 and use your Bitcoin Cash like you should.
Perfect. This one just came up, and I haven't actually dug too much deep into it, but it's called Matter, and the link is matter.cash. So again, we'll put links to all this stuff, but so you can see here, it's kind of like yours.org, but it's they're definitely trying to be a competitor to yours, a competitor to Reddit. It's a decentralized blogging and social media community, and it's powered by actually BitDB. BitDB, that protocol developed by Unwriter. And actually, he just announced today that he's releasing a new upgraded version of it. I'll kind of pull him up here, but basically BitDB 2.0, not just an upgrade, but a quantum leap. And so I guess they rewrote the whole thing, battle tested it with the stress test, and it's just supposed to be a lot better. But you can actually go to BitDB itself and kind of like look through op return on the blockchain. So anyway, Matter is running on top of it. It's a blogging and social media community. And yeah, they have submatters, so they're trying to, like, I think really compete with Reddit is really the goal here. There's submatters and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to see how this works out for them. But haven't looked too deeply into it, but I think they just kind of started to reinvent themselves recently. So
nice. And we're gonna do cash tips.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yep. So tipcash.tips.
Tipcash. Yeah.
Tipcash.tips, right? So their big whole thing here is like just an easy way to send paper wallet tips to people. And so this has like a lot of use cases, I think, but the most glaringly obvious one would be like, so you can click here, I want to create a paper wallet tip. And basically you can, pick a color. So I'm going to pick green. And what this does is it just gives me like a printable way to have, it looks like here, about 6 different Bitcoin Cash tip wallets. And so if I zoom in here, you can see it pretty much just sets it up where you can fold it into itself. So you just end up giving this rectangular, cool looking tip image. And it has a public address, private key, and it tells them how to sweep the funds into your wallet. So this is pretty sweet, right? You can just kind of print these out, bring them, tip your favorite bartenders, stuff like that, right? A lot of use cases here.
Yeah, I do like how they fold up. They look kind of cool when they fold up, as compared to some of the other paper wallets that I've seen. This is kind of something you slide down. You could slide it down the bar. Act all cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Slip it to someone else. Slip it to a random stranger or something like that.
It's kind of cool. It kind of reminds you of like a dollar bill, right? I mean,
yeah. So
you can see here the image here on the screen. I mean, that's pretty slick. So, good stuff. I like this a lot. I thought about it even when I was overseas. I was like, I had a cab driver. I thought that it would be really cool to tip them in Bitcoin, but I was like, well, I don't really know. There wasn't really a good way to do it. Like, I didn't have Cointex. I couldn't, but something like this would be have one of these and kind of do that.
Yeah,
be a cool way of doing it.
Could even start even just like giving it out to homeless people. Yeah. Start spreading Bitcoin Cash for everyone.
Economic freedom.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to mention was we've talked about it a lot, but Bitcoin token. There's a video he kind of presented. Clemens Lay presented on his Bitcoin token. I think for the most part, Bitcoin token and Simple Ledger Protocol are really the top 2 running token proposals right now. I think what the Colored Coins guys are doing is cool, but I think for the most part, the simplicity of both these protocols are going to kind of take the lead. So Simple Ledger Protocol is working off op return, which has its own idea behind it, where you're kind of building a consensus layer on top of Bitcoin. But the cool thing about Bitcoin token is that it's built with the transactions themselves. So pretty much each token is tied to Bitcoin inherently, which is obviously quite different from things like the Omni protocol and that kind of stuff. So, but we'll put a link to Clem's video. We talked about these in the tokenization episode, but a lot of exciting stuff.
Video was pretty good too. I think it was like for the San Francisco Bitcoin Cash meetup.
It was just, I think, the crypto meetup. Yeah, it was a ton of...
Yeah. But, I thought the presentation was pretty good, too. I'm definitely interested to see when it finally kind of comes out a little bit more. But I think his high-level description, he had, like, a small little demo that he did inside that presentation as well. Definitely recommend people checking that out if you're interested in tokenization on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain.
Yep. So, perfect.
Well, so that's a good summary of the projects going on. I'm sorry if we missed you.
Yeah.
But, what were we going to say?
No, we definitely probably did, because I can't imagine we're, we keep missing stuff every week. There's just so much stuff happening. It's crazy. So.
Right. Right. But, so, Connor and I were thinking that, there's been like a lot of disagreements in the whole space, and we think that, it might be good to actually just go back to the Bitcoin white paper and actually do like a deep dive into each section here. So I think we're gonna like do a series of videos, and I think we might like even splice them up into each section as well. That way, people can kind of easily access each section. But like today, I think we're going to try and get through the abstract up through section 3. Is that right, Connor?
Yep.
And so we're going to try and break down each section, read it, analyze it word by word. Well, not word by word, but, you kind of get the gist. But I think, we're really going to try and do a deep dive into Bitcoin white paper and what it actually means, because we kind of discussed it beforehand, and we feel like a lot of people often overlook the Bitcoin white paper. And to be honest, I don't think that many people are actually reading it and actually putting all of it together, because a lot of the problems that other blockchains face, I think a lot of the problems that other blockchains face were already solved in the Bitcoin solution, pretty much. And I think... it's a lack of, I don't know. I don't think people really understand the white paper. So I think we're going to try and just do a deep dive into each section here in a more audio and visual way for people. Because one thing for me is like, I don't know, I have a hard time reading things sometimes, or reading them all the way through. So I think, trying to put it down in an audio podcast version, I think it might benefit a lot of people. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, I think, most people haven't, we talk about this a lot. I go to blockchain kind of groups and stuff around town.
Mm-hmm.
I would be shocked if 80% of them have actually read this paper,
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're going to cover today is if you kind of look at this, at this white paper itself, it goes very well beyond this idea of like a blockchain. And if you actually, like, again, I'm sure you've seen this happen, but if you go to these meetups and stuff, it's always like, yeah, so Bitcoin introduced the idea of a blockchain. And so now here's like X, Y, and Z, which improve upon Bitcoin because blockchains can't scale and blah, blah, blah. But like, if you actually read this paper, it talks about like an entirely new cash system that goes well beyond just this idea of a chain of digital signatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we're going to kick off part 1 of our white paper series with, again, talking through the abstract to sections 1 through 3.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty excited about this. I think that it'll help, like you said, right? It'll it'll kind of make this digestible for people who don't want to read, or if they even if they do want to read it, but maybe it's hard for them to understand pieces. We're going to try and just break it down to make it easy to understand. So
yeah, I've had a lot of people actually come to me and ask me if like they're very introductory level to the system and Bitcoin and cryptography and blockchain, and they always kind of ask me like, am I capable of reading the white paper right now? So I think even the white paper, it's a little intimidating to people as well, which I think, I don't think people should be intimidated by it. So hopefully we can break it down a little more simpler way.
Yeah.
So
you want to jump in?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's jump into this thing. All right.
First thing off the bat, I mean, isn't it weird? The title itself is already pretty contradictory from a lot of what you hear in the space. So if people that don't know, it's Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So off the bat, it is not a digital gold store of value, peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It was written by Satoshi Nakamoto, unknown entity in the world. And we're going to start with just the abstracts. So we're going to kind of just read this, actually. I mean, I think it's important. Again, you can kind of treat this in an audiobook, whatever you want, but we're going to read through every word in the paper, but we're going to stop as we go along and kind of break it down. So I'll start with the abstract. So the abstract, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is still required to prevent double spending. We propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. The longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as the majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. So this, very, very clearly, I think, kind of defines the whole paper. It does actually a surprisingly great job of kind of touching on every little bit and piece that will come up. So I think like the main thing that I think sticks out to me based on what we just talked about is number one, right? We're describing a peer-to-peer cash system. So off the bat, we're saying this is supposed to be used as payments, as a payment system. Again, that off the bat, that's what it is. But also, it says here, digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is still required to prevent double spending. So really, the blockchain itself is only part of the solution. You need some kind of system, and what we find out as we go through this is it's really the economic incentives of the system that prevent the double spending from occurring. So I think that's just very interesting. It's not talked about. Again, you go to these groups and they'll all try and lie to you. They'll say, blockchain, the big innovation of blockchain that Satoshi invented, which he didn't, by the way, but that's the innovation. Forget everything else, without even understanding that the economics of the system is really the innovation, right?
Right. And I think just at a high level too, what I kind of pull away from this abstract here is like, it's a high level summary of Bitcoin. And I think it establishes a problem that Bitcoin is trying to face. And I think, the problem is in current finance and today, especially in an online digital world, we currently have a problem of like legitimizing transactions without a third party and preventing fraud at a high rate. So, the solution here that Bitcoin offers is, that peer-to-peer network, that's time-stamping transactions by hashing them into the ongoing chain. But, that's the solution here to a current problem that we're facing today. And, it all kind of pulls it all together, like the economic incentives a little bit here at a high level too, how the longest chain not only serves as a proof of sequence, it's the largest pool of CPU power. So, it introduces the ideas of proof of work and how that secures the network. I don't want to get into proof of work too much yet because that's a whole section in itself. But this abstract does a really good job at a high level of explaining everything that Bitcoin is. And just another kind of key point I think here is that last sentence there. Messages are broadcasted on a best effort basis, and to me, I think that kind of introduces the idea of Bitcoin being a small world network, which, small world network gets a lot of shit these days. But I think, that really is important, how these messages are broadcasted on a best effort basis. And what that is kind of inferring is that, these nodes have to be high connected, or there has to be high connectivity between the nodes to make sure that, these messages are being broadcasted efficiently. So it, Abstract does a pretty good job of explaining Bitcoin at a high level.
Yeah, and I think to touch on, I think everything you said here pretty much covers it, but just because we are going to touch on it at the end, it's also spelled out pretty clearly in the abstract that the governance model itself, right? So the governance model is determined in the case of, so the blockchain itself, like you said, right? So it says here it provides part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if you don't have something preventing this double spending problem. And the double spending problem itself can only be solved if you have an incentive model that fixes it. And so what happens if the incentives clash, right? What happens if you have like warring factions in the incentive model? It's spelled out pretty clearly here that the longest chain not only serves as the proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. Again, we're going to touch on this a lot, but that longest chain piece is really the governance model of Bitcoin, right? So,
Yep.
So, the introduction here, this is pretty straightforward. So we'll kind of just we'll go through it, but I think we have some interesting kind of takes on why this is brought about in the introduction. So, kind of blow right through it. So commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weaknesses of the trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible, since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practical transaction size and cutting off the possibility for small, casual transactions. And there is a broader cost in the loss of the ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. Merchants must be wary of their customers, hassling them for more information than they would otherwise need. A certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable. These costs and payment uncertainties can be avoided in person by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists to make payments over a communications channel without a trusted party. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. Transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. In this paper, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of the chronological order of transactions. The system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes. So why here, right, Corey? What's your take immediately off the bat? Like why is the introduction?
Well, I have some interesting takes that I feel like often get confused in the community, and specifically in the first paragraph. The introduction, it introduces Bitcoin, And Bitcoin often gets confused with politics, I feel like, and political beliefs. And no matter what your political beliefs are, I think it's important here to say that, you know, the Bitcoin introduced in this section is more about an efficient and trustworthy system of payments.
Yep.
There's really no talk of anarchy, libertarianism. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that and like being free staters, and I'm all for freedom and everything. But I think sometimes, especially when you start talking about Bitcoin as a religion and we have all these different tribes, I think we need to look at what Bitcoin really is. And I think what's introduced here, to me, this just seems like Satoshi Nakamoto is really just presenting an idea of a much, much significantly more efficient system of sending online payments and payments that you can trust too.
Yep. It's interesting, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that try and like really tie the, like you said, not that we're against or anything, but there's a lot of people that try and tie this like anti-state, anti-government thing to Bitcoin, but really there's nothing at all, like you're saying in the white paper, that makes it political. And in fact, it really is just saying, hey, we have a problem. Payments on the internet are not, number one, they're not conducive to micropayments. Like like he says here, right? There's a minimum practical transaction size that can only exist across the internet or any communication medium, and it cuts off the possibility for small casual transactions. So, I mean, really, that's number one. One of the things talked about of solving, which again is interesting, right, Corey? Because again, if you take like the BTC side of things, of like, well, you should be, transaction costs aren't a bad thing. I mean, that really flies in the face of why Bitcoin was introduced. Like you're saying, I mean, Bitcoin wasn't introduced for this digital store value. Like, there's really nothing mentioned about fiat money in this. There's really nothing mentioned about like, it's really just, we need a peer-to-peer cash system that's frictionless and that like you said, it's trustworthy, but it's trustless, right? I mean, you can trust the system, you can trust the network, but yet you're not relying on a quote unquote trusted third party.
Right. And I mean, it even says like in there too, a certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable.
Yep.
And like, it's almost like, why should that be unavoidable? Like, why should we accept a certain level amount of fraud, especially in like a digital world that we live in today? The next sentence kind of talks about how like cost and payment uncertainties can be avoided in person by using a physical currency. But physical currency in today's world just isn't going to work.
Yep.
It's not going to work anymore, especially in an online digital market. So yeah, I mean, Bitcoin really is just an efficient, trustworthy system of payments. I mean, the problem is merchants want to guarantee that they're going to be they're guaranteed payment.
Yep.
And the solution today that we have, and the problem that I think this white paper's establishing is that this third-party verification system has to gain so much information about the buyers up to a point where it's like, well, that's a little too much information, because now you're putting the buyers at risk of giving too much information, letting their identities getting hacked. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And using cryptography and this solution, it blows my mind. It really is amazing.
What's interesting? It's a little off topic, but I was actually listening to a conversation on the Bill Simmons podcast. Bill Simmons, and this was actually back in 2009, and which is very actually ironic. It was in 2009.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was talking about how at the time there was a writer's strike in Hollywood. And I know this is a little off topic, but it very much ties into like, why are we here? Right? Like, why are we doing this? And and the writer's strike at the time in the United States around Hollywood is about like, well, writers were upset that they were worried that studios were making money on the internet that they weren't getting a cut of. And the whole conversation kind of wrapped around the idea that like, Well, number one, no one was figuring out how to make money on the internet at the time. And then like number two, there's a whole conversation they had about like, well, if I want to buy something, it's a big pain. I have to put in my information, my credit card information, my shipping information just to make a payment. Right. I think, and it was just interesting listening to that conversation. And then like nothing has really changed today. Like for us, it has, because we are in this like Bitcoin world and you kind of can understand like we've used the money button. We've used like these things that are coming out that it's just like, oh, click a button, money is sent. I don't have to put in my information or anything like that. But but it's just interesting to me that I was listening to that literally today. I was like, nothing has changed. Like the ability to go on the New York Times and buy an article, like that doesn't exist, right? You're paying for subscriptions. You're putting in all this information. So,
right.
But one of the things I want to talk about, sorry, I know it's a little off topic, but I just think it's interesting. Like these things are still a problem, like 10 years removed from this paper. And it's because we've been talking about all these like non-issues, like the scaling problem. But like it says here, transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. Where is that today?
Exactly. And this is, yeah. I mean, we've been wasting our time talking about block size, where I think we have the solution for the sellers, making it computational impractical to reverse transactions. We have that.
Yep.
And this is what Bitcoin solves for the merchants. Now, the problem ends up being is the buyers, to make sure that they're going to get, because obviously, Bitcoin solves the problem of the payment. The merchants get Bitcoin. They get the electronic peer-to-peer cash system right away. The problem is now for the buyers to make sure that they can get their products that they're getting. And specifically, Satoshi Nakamoto says right here, routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. Now, Bitcoin was not the routine escrow mechanism that could easily be implemented. I think that Satoshi Nakamoto knew that this could already be done.
Yep.
Especially in a system of law, where a merchant legally has an obligation to provide that service, given that payment. So it is frustrating to see that on the Bitcoin white paper today. And we're sitting here in 2018 when Bitcoin was designed back in 2009. And we're sitting here talking about block size.
Yep.
Block size? Block size? We're sitting here talking about block size? But really, it's...
Well, in the original code, there was a marketplace. There was a marketplace in the original code. And to be honest with you, like nothing really has been done on that front. So, yeah. But so it's interesting. So,
not, and I'm not saying that people aren't working on this now.
Right.
I'm not saying that. I think people are working on this now. I think finally that we've gotten over that hump. I think we're going to start seeing these routine escrow mechanisms. I think we're going to start seeing them being implemented. But that was something to me that really stood out, and it stood out to you as well. That they're not there.
Well, and I think and not to like beat the dead horse, but again, we're sitting here talking about Bitcoin as money, as cash, and I think like that philosophy has been so far removed from Bitcoin for years now, and so I think that's kind of the purpose. Like we're here, and it's like, well, someone's got to start thinking about Bitcoin as cash again. So hopefully this helps people like really come back and think about this and be like, oh wait, maybe what I would say about this, there's money to be made. There's money to be made for people building these solutions like that. Again, we're 10 years removed and they're not really built yet. And like, again, like all props to $5, right? This is a marketplace. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be built. So anyway.
Right.
So.
And we've talked a little bit too on our shows before where we talk about merchant making sure that they get paid, and some, if they're using a POS system that offers some type of insurance of a double spend.
Yep.
There's money to be made there as well.
Exactly.
And that's one of these escrow mechanisms that we're kind of talking about.
Yep. Well said. Well said.
So, boom. Yeah. All right. I think that covers the introduction.
Yep. Perfect. So.
All right. You want me to read this one?
Yeah, you got
Take a little break.
Yeah.
Maybe sit back, enjoy a nice cold brew.
I'll pop it
so
up.
Section number 2, transactions. All right. We define an electric coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by digitally signing a hash of the previous transaction and the public key of the next owner and adding these to the end of the coin. A payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership. The problem, of course, is the payee can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. A common solution is to introduce a trusted central authority or mint that checks every transaction for double spending. After each transaction, the coin must be returned to the mint to issue a new coin, and only coins issued directly from the mint are trusted not to be double spent. The problem with this solution is that the fate of the entire money system depends on the company running the mint, with every transaction having to go through them just like a bank. We need a way for the payee to know that the previous owners did not sign any earlier transactions. For our purposes, the earliest transaction is the one that counts. So we don't care about later attempts to double spend. The only way to confirm the absence of a transaction is to be aware of all the transactions. In the mint-based model, the mint was aware of all transactions and decided which arrived first. To accomplish this without a trusted party, transactions must be publicly announced, and we need a system for participants to agree on a single history of the order in which they were received. The payee needs proof that at the time of each transaction, the majority of nodes agreed it was first received.
So should we, let's, before we even dive in, I think we should explain this image to help people, anyone, because again, I think it's easy for us to be like, well, this all, like, you've used Bitcoin, this makes sense. But for anyone who, like, hasn't used it, like, this image probably does not help clarify it at all.
Yeah. Well, I think just first to start off bat, like, I think people kind of get confused with, like, electric coin, thinking of it as, like, a coin, like a nickel or a penny or some kind of, like, physical thing. And I think once you get over the hump of saying that, like, that an electric coin is actually just a chain of digital signatures of ownership.
Right.
So it's pretty much almost like a piece of paper that continuously signs away ownership to another person.
Yep.
So yeah, I just want to make sure that, because for me, when I first heard about Bitcoin, I thought of it as, like, you know, this single thing. I think when you start thinking of it in terms of a chain of digital signatures of ownership, I think that's when it starts to all come together and, like, how the verification process works.
When I think, like, right, if you abstract away from physical money to just, like, electronic money, which is what we have today. I mean, right? I mean, for the most part, we use digital bank accounts and that kind of stuff. If I were to send you from my bank account to your account $5, the ownership just gets signed from me, the $5 sent to you, right? And
yeah,
that's just digital information. But so, but the beauty really of Bitcoin is that using cryptography, you can actually verify that ledger, right, throughout the coin, or and in this case, the coin's history. So to kind of explain this image here, you can think of a hash just as a unique cryptographic identity of a file, of text, of anything, of any kind of digital good. Whether that's, like, any digital file can be hashed, where you have a unique identifier that points to that digital file. So in the case of, like, Corey, let's say you're owner 0 in this image, right? And you want to send me Bitcoin. Okay. So basically what you would do is, well, that's actually not a good example. Let's say, just in general, you're owner 1. Let's say you have Bitcoin, owner 0 sent you Bitcoin via a hash. Okay, they sent you this cryptographic proof that the Bitcoin exists, and they relinquished ownership to you with their signature here. So now you, owner one, have what's called a public key, which public key is just an address. So if you want to make a Bitcoin transaction as defined here in this white paper, what you would do is you would say, okay, Connor, I'm going to send this to owner two, you. You would sign with your private key, which is just like a password, and you'd sign and verify the transaction, which would alter this hash and form a new hash. And now owner two, me, owns it, and then I can continue that as far as I want. But the beauty of this is that because, just look into cryptography, what you can understand is that you can actually work backwards through this and verify ownership over time. So that's really the root of what this transaction system is getting at. And it really is just a cryptographic concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we move forward from that, I think what gets kind of interesting is that, like, really what the white paper here outlines is, well, today we rely on mints. We rely on these trusted third parties, trusted central authorities, really. Like, this is like probably where it gets the most political here, because the mint itself in today's society is government, right? So like in our case, it's the U.S. government, where really they mint the currency. And even though, like, if I use my Visa credit card, Visa acts as that trusted third party to say whether or not my transaction is valid. on the root level, right? Like, the U.S. government is who tells Visa your transactions are valid because you're using real U.S. dollar, right?
Right.
So in a way, what we do is really built on layers of of trusted third parties, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary on its own, right? But so I think you can jump in, but really I think what this says here on a high level is just that in the mint based model, the mint is the one who's kind of deciding what transactions are valid and which ones count, and then
well, it's almost not the transactions, it's they're verifying that the coin or the note that's being used to transfer wealth is valid.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily the transaction, but it's more like legitimized liquidity that is being transferred over to another owner.
Yep.
Which I think, and the problem that I have with, allowing something like a third party do this is that they can then create new promissory notes at their will. Exactly. And that's the problem that I think a lot of currencies have today, especially in the fiat world, is, this threat of hyperinflation. So that's kind of another thing that Bitcoin's trying to solve, is they're trying to control the level of inflation as well. Because the price of Bitcoin is very volatile, and it can skyrocket up. But the rate at which more Bitcoin is being created, that's a relatively stable amount. And the halvings that we have, that process comes through proof of work. And
it's interesting that we haven't even gotten to the idea of the deflationary cap, right? The cap itself hasn't even been identified here in the white paper. I mean, really, all we're talking about is like, it talks about the mint based model where but really, in all this section is saying is the mint is the one who decides on which transactions are valid, and so again, it's interesting, these concepts of like, really just looking at the white paper here so far, all we're talking about is how do we solve this double spending problem, right? But you're right. You're completely right that Bitcoin obviously does solve the minting problem itself, right? Right. So the only thing I wanted to mention here is that, like, the small world stuff itself actually becomes noticeable, because it's saying here that in order to even accomplish this, the transactions must be publicly announced, and you need a system where the participants in the network agree on a single history. And really that's done because the announcement is you're incentivized to do that announcement.
Right.
And obviously then the payee themselves needs a easy way to ping the majority of nodes to figure out when it was first received. So we'll talk about that a lot more in the future, but obviously that's interesting right there. So
yeah. And I think too, like just talking about an efficient system that we have now too, I don't want to harp too much on this example, but like if we're actually using like physical currency, try and relate Bitcoin to a physical currency of what's actually going on. It's almost like taking a US dollar bill and then going into a store and, you're within that mint, you are the owner of that US dollar bill. And when you make that payment to the store, the merchant, you're signing away on the dollar bill that, maybe the merchant now owns that dollar bill because you're paying them for this transaction. Now the problem becomes is the next time that US dollar bill is used somewhere else, someone wants to make sure that that's a legit US dollar bill. Now, in that system of using a physical currency, that merchant has to let the US government know that they now have ownership of that coin. And not only do they need to verify that, but the person, like me, going into the store, I need to verify that I transferred that over. So now in Bitcoin, that almost gets, in a digital world of Bitcoin, that broadcasting of that transfer of ownership is almost like automated now.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's all about really just that much more efficient system.
Yep.
So yeah, not to harp too much on that, but
no, yeah, well said. So this section 3 is brief, but it's the meat and guts of what you hear in the space today. So we'll cover it and talk about it. So section 3 is called timestamp server. So the solution to everything we're talking about here, so the solution we propose begins with a timestamp server. A timestamp server works by taking a hash of a block of items to be timestamped and widely publishing the hash, such as in a newspaper or Usenet post. The timestamp proves that the data must have existed at the time, obviously, in order to get into the hash. Each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash, forming a chain with each additional timestamp reinforcing the ones before it. So we have infamously the quote-unquote first time you ever hear of a blockchain. Because that's blockchain. So if you actually look at the history, Satoshi Nakamoto was not the first to talk about a blockchain. A chain of digital signatures was very widely talked about since like 2001, I believe. But really what you're looking at here is the modern day description of a blockchain. Now what's interesting is we have about 9 more sections to go. So if you go again to these blockchain cryptocurrency meetups and stuff, they'll really try and tell you that Bitcoin's innovation stops here. They'll say, well, Satoshi invented the blockchain, but now here's my shilly project that fixes what Satoshi couldn't figure out. And that's because they never, ever even understood proof of work. They never understood how the network operates. They never understood the incentive model behind it. They never understood how SPV would work. Really, it's insane to me that this is something no one understood. And we're going to get into it. We're covering the whole white paper. We're going to make sure everyone actually understands this stuff. But here it is. Here's the blockchain. So we'll cover this real quick in depth. Really what this is describing is, all those transactions that we mentioned up here. Let's just say that this all occurs in about 10 minutes. We can take all of this right here, take a hash of it, again, a unique cryptographic identifier, and publish the hash to the entire network. And then the entire network would then, maybe in another 10 minutes, find all the other transactions that occur, publish a hash of it, and build on top of the previous hash. And basically what you have here is just a blockchain. You have an immutable ledger of digital signatures that reliably has a history that's very hard to change.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's important to know that, it's immutable, or like you said, it's really hard to change.
Yep.
And like for someone to change it, they theoretically have to do all of the work that was previously done to change it, and then that's what kind of in the abstract, I think it said something about outpacing, trying to outpace the honest chain. Well, if you have to redo all the work that was previously done while keeping up with the current workers that are building on top of the honest chain,
yep.
That's where the immobility starts to come in, I think, a little. And, that's where it starts to be secure and efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we have it. I mean, really, this is, what's amazing to me is what we've just covered is already, honestly, what we've just covered is the introduction to blockchain that you will get. Again, the whole
Mm-hmm.
blockchain thing just pisses me off. It's just like, that's the craze right now. And I'm surrounded by it in my city. I'm surrounded by these people that just really think that that's the new thing, but it's not. Again, it only took Satoshi 3 sections to get through these concepts. And what we'll go into in very much in depth in the next sections, that Satoshi really built an economic system that solves these problems. So again, if we come back to the introduction, or maybe the abstract, digital signatures provide part of the solution. Really the solution to prevent double spending is all in the economics, which Satoshi built on top of Adam Back's Hashcash, improved it. So
it is kind of ironic too how we talk about, how blockchain, how everyone's like, yeah, Bitcoin, I don't know, but blockchain,
exactly.
I think that was the revolutionary tech. And if you actually look at like the whole white paper in this section here, the section here is like one of the smaller ones.
Yep.
It's but people seem to hone in on that, and they might just be a little jelly that they didn't come up with Bitcoin themselves, so they're trying to create their own Bitcoin now.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we'll conclude. This is section 1 of our white paper series. Or part 1.
Yeah.
We plan to have probably 4 parts. So this is 1 through 3. We'll get through all 12 parts. So or 12 sections. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one too.
Yeah,
about proof of work,
the network and incentives. Really the meat and guts of where everything went wrong with BTC, I think. But yeah, all right. So we're going to kind of pivot away from this, but also not. And we're going to touch on this briefly. We're doing better. Well, 53 minutes here, but so what we want to talk about is because, again, I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin Cash world, like, they've seen the white paper, they probably understand this stuff. But number one, we think it's important to talk about the white paper, but also we want to make sure that we get, why are we talking about the white paper? Why is the white paper still important? And it's because, like, the white paper, it's not as Jimmy Song and Roger Ver, they did this whole debate, and it, quote unquote debate, I guess. I wouldn't even call it a debate, probably. But and that was all Jimmy's fault. First of all, Jimmy, that guy's, he's the worst in my opinion. But so his
well, he had a pre-written script.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, dude, his paper flew away, and he was like, "Oh God, I can't do it." My paper flew away. Whatever. Anyway,
I quit.
Yeah, exactly. But in their thing, Jimmy told Roger, he was like, "You treat Satoshi like a god. You treat the white paper like the Bible." And I think the more accurate way of looking at the white paper is like a constitution. And like to you and me in the United States, like that makes a lot of sense. The Constitution is something that obviously like we know a lot about, but to people outside the United States, they may not know exactly like what that means. But to us in the United States, the Constitution is a guideline for governance, right? It's the guideline for how our country is set up. It's how our rule of law is set up. But the Constitution can be amended. The Constitution isn't the Bible. It's not set in stone. It's not like we've had amendments to the Constitution, but the amendment process itself is very hard. And so the reason, like, I really do think, like, and not only is the amendment process hard, the amendments can only be done if you can really go through a rigorous proof of why the amendment should be done, right? And I think, like, we should treat I'm not going to treat the white paper as the Bible and Satoshi as a god. I'm going to treat Satoshi like the founding father of the United States, and I'm going to treat the white paper as the Constitution, because I really think that, like, if you want to say that the white paper got something wrong, you better show a very rigorous proof and number one, demonstrate how it's wrong, and then number two, demonstrate why your solution is a better solution, right? And I think for the most part, the Constitution of the white paper has been pretty battle tested. Like number one, it hasn't been allowed to work in a lot of circumstances, and that is evident with, like, SPV, like simplified payment verification. A real SPV wallet has not actually been built as described in the white paper, which is incredible. It's really amazing. Like there are things close to it, but really the SPV as defined here, and we'll talk about that later on, but hasn't been built. So, and the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because, as we kind of lead towards this November fork, there's a lot of, like, dispute around the longest chain. The idea of like, it comes up a ton in the white paper. It comes up, like, over, I think, 6 times. This idea of the longest chain, and what we're already seeing out of, like, some individuals is that the longest chain. So what we need to get out of the way is like well, the first thing is, like, if the longest chain governs Bitcoin, and you're going to say BCH is Bitcoin, which we do on this show weekly, right?
Yeah.
Then we're hypocrites, because the longest chain right now is BTC, and the majority of hash rate is on BTC, right? Now,
unfortunately, yes.
I think that's a fair thing, right? Like, we can spend hours talking about all that kind of stuff, but fine. You know what? Like fine. You're right. You're not wrong. Whatever. But what we're gonna like where we're at, and you can disagree with us, and we're happy to have a conversation about it, is the BCH fork was an extenuating circumstance. You're dealing with a chain that, number one, viewed Nakamoto Consensus as an attack on Bitcoin. They viewed the idea of hard forking as an attack on Bitcoin, when it's very clearly outlined in the white paper as the governance model.
Right.
And then number two, Nakamoto Consensus was actually not allowed to work on BCH and BTC. BCH on its own started with this idea of the emergency difficulty adjustment. It started with replay protection. So Nakamoto Consensus actually never got to try to have a chance to succeed on BCH and BTC. You can argue that XT tried it in 2015, and I think that's a valid thing. But anyway, all I think we can agree on, and Corey, you're welcome to make any other statement on this, but I think in order for us to have an actual adult conversation about this longest chain argument with BCH, is it was an extenuating circumstance. It was the best thing we could have done to at least just start to get back on track. We're on a deadline with the halvening, the mining halvening.
Mm-hmm.
We had to, in my opinion, it was like, well, we had to do it. There were some people trying to still, like, build pools to block SegWit, but BCH emerged. It was the best option. SegWit activated. SegWit, in our opinion, is like, it ruins Bitcoin's security model, really, it takes the signature data outside the chain. It's a nightmare. It's a miner subsidy. It's a nightmare. But so we can talk about that all day long, but I don't want to. But BCH, BTC, extending circumstance, I understand why you would say that, but long term, the hash will leave BTC. BTC is worthless. The hash will not stay on BTC. So I think you can argue Satoshi's governance model will work with BCH, BTC in the long run, but but
short term, I think we're right now we're in a short term era of a lot of misconception.
Yep.
And I feel like, and you kind of hit it the right spot, where Bitcoin Cash was a short term solution to what was happening on the SegWit side, BTC SegWit side. And I think that is another reason why it's so important that we get back to that original protocol now at this point.
Yep.
Because we're in that short-term era of misconception, and we did what needed to be done to make sure that, this chain could go on. We just need to get back on track, and we're not on track right now. That's why we need to get back to that original protocol. But yeah, I agree with you also on the SegWit side that the hash isn't going to stay there. When you're taking things off chain, and the block reward is gonna have, if they don't change anything in the protocol, which they honestly might, which would be crazy.
Yeah.
But if it's gonna have, there's not going to be an incentive to keep the chain going, and if there is no chain, there is no off chain either. So you need. Well, I don't. Yeah. I don't know. That's another conversation, but
yeah.
If you're taking things off chain, you need on chain as well. And if you don't have an economic incentive to mine it, people are going to go to other places, especially if BTC is going to support this coin agnostic world where hash power is going to be going everywhere. Hash power is going to go away from Bitcoin Core then.
Right.
Who's going to mine Bitcoin Core if they're not going to get anything for it,
Right.
I'm not saying that's the case today, because they'll get a lot of money for it today.
Yeah.
But that's the unfortunate circumstance of being in such a small... the whole crypto market is so small right now, where I don't think financially, we're not valued correctly at all
not
right
at all,
now.
No.
There's so many scams out there. It's kind of sad right now. And we've talked a little bit about it in previous episodes, how the financial aspect in this whole thing kind of sucks.
Yep.
And it kind of hurts a lot of people's emotions as well. They get really, really defensive too when their money's involved with it.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of something that we're seeing on the BTC Core side. But obviously, on the Bitcoin Cash side, we are here to build this efficient, online, trustworthy payment system that we just established, we just described. So let's keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. and so basically, I think what we're, at the root of what we talk about on this show is like, we're here for Bitcoin. We're like, if BCH right now is our best chance to keep Bitcoin, the peer-to-peer cash payment system, alive, we're going to do that. Mm-hmm. And we're interested in fulfilling Bitcoin as described in this white paper, and we're going to use the governance model as given in the Bitcoin white paper. So the reason why we're talking about this idea of the longest chain is there's this brewing narrative amongst certain, a few individuals that like the longest chain isn't really how Bitcoin's governance model works. And I'm, first person I'm going to call is Jonald Fuqbal, who's an awesome guy, founder of Electron Cash. He definitely was involved with the formation of Bitcoin Cash, even at the beginning. I like this guy. We actually are talking about putting together a bet, and I've agreed to the bet. At least one Bitcoin that's going to be put on the table for... My argument is that I actually don't think that... I think that all of this argument around the longest chain not governing Bitcoin, to me, says that Jihan Wu and Hypo Yang actually are in the minority hash rate. So, just want to call it out. Jonald takes the opposing... He thinks ABC will be the dominant software. I think the narratives around... The reason why I'm bringing all this up is I don't think... If they're all talking about this, don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that ABC actually does have the majority hash rate right now. There's a lot of respected individuals on the BU camp, the Bitcoin Illuminati camp, that don't agree with canonical transaction ordering. They don't agree with, DSV, Data Sig Verify, I think they're okay with that. Most people in Bitcoin Limited. But so anyway, Jonald, just let you know if you're listening, taking you on for the bet. We'll write up the details. We'll make that happen. But I want to address this article. Here is this article saying, no, that's not how the longest chain works in Bitcoin. And I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I'll put a link, put a link in the video. But I want to kind of address something he says at the very end here. So he says, like, the keywords here are, so in the conclusion of the white paper, they vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of valid blocks by working on extending them, and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them. The key words here are valid and invalid. Nowhere does the white paper say that the majority has dominion over what is valid. And I think he really contradicts himself here very, very succinctly. Because the white paper itself says the extended chain is the chain of valid blocks. The minority chain, the ones being refused to be worked on, are invalid. So I think the white paper actually is very clear about the fact that the majority does have dominion over what is valid. I'm going to reference the white paper, but I want to just bolster the fact that, like, you have to understand this isn't just what scares me the most is I feel like the UASF core narratives are really coming back. So Omri, Dedalnix, he says here, the BCH ticker is not stolen by anyone. ABC produced the code and via BTC mined it and listed it on its exchange first. Nchain can either find a compromise or create their own chain if they do not like BCH. So ignoring whether or not Nchain has the majority hash rate, Omri is kind of already pulling out that idea of, like, well, you either stick with us because we're BCH or make your own chain.
Which is kind of centralized.
Yep.
If he's saying that.
It's core. It's core. Core saying we're the only, we govern Bitcoin, right?
Right.
And there's another thing of Omri in a Telegram group. I'm not going to bring it up, but in a Telegram group, Omri is saying, like, we need to push this idea that Craig is pushing BSV. And we need to push the narrative of BSV. And all it reminds me of is just core. It reminds me of the UASF stuff. It reminds me of, like, we need to push this idea hard and say that they're a new chain. They're not BCH. When, for all intents and purposes, if we all are going to agree we're Bitcoin, which some people may not, but I think we are Bitcoin. I think this is Bitcoin. We have to fulfill Bitcoin and try and make this thing work. We're the last chance to make this white paper actually succeed. Then I think we should govern ourselves by the governance model. And the governance model is spelled out very clearly. It's in the introduction. It says, the longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as the majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. Very clear. Very clear that the valid chain is the longest chain. That's the one that is controlled by the honest nodes. The honest nodes here being defined by the ones that are doing... Again, Bitcoin just incentivizes you to be honest, because if you aren't honest, you lose money. Whew. I mean, I'm going to... Again, I know I'm getting long-winded here, but we should just, again, make sure everyone understands where this is all defined in the white paper. Because it scares me. Right. It scares me that people are trying to say, no, the white paper doesn't matter. Because, fuck Craig.
The hardest part, though, is that split, though. The BTC, BCH split. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting confused. It's complicated. And I completely understand that. It can be confusing.
Is it confusion, or is it... To me, it almost just seems like it's being used as justification.
Yeah. It's being used as justification to implement new amendments, like you're saying, to a constitution almost.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, it's being used to justify that, and it's unfortunate what had to happen with the BTC BCH split, and that could have been avoided easily.
Yep.
If we were still on one chain, if the miners would have stepped up, but they didn't. That's sorry. I'm almost going into another rant. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think that's why, just to hone it back to where we're at with this white paper, and that's what we're gonna try and do with this series and segments is like try and go back to the white paper, try to bring everything back, so that people understand the importance of Bitcoin as a whole. Because people like to take little pieces in and out and make their own little justification for everything, but that doesn't work.
Nope. No, definitely not.
Especially this coin agnostic world that everyone's trying to push. I have a really hard time thinking that that's going to continue. I don't think you're going to be able to use hooker coin at Dunkin' Donuts to get a donut or something. Like, I don't think that's going to work.
No. And I think again, what did Bitcoin solve? It's solving payments. This problem is still there. There's only one thing that I know of that solves the problem, and it's Bitcoin, and in the form of BCH. And so let's just let's fly through this. We're at an hour 11 now.
Mm-hmm.
Section 4, proof of work section, says this very clearly. The majority decision is represented by the longest chain, which has the greatest proof of work effort invested in it. If a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, the honest chain will grow the fastest and outpace any competing chains. Section 5. Nodes always consider the longest chain to be the correct one. Again, nodes always consider the longest chain to be the correct one and will keep working on extending it. If two nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously, some nodes may receive one or the other first. In that case, they work on the first one they received, but save the other branch in case it becomes longer. The tie will be broken when the next proof of work is found and one branch becomes longer. The nodes that were working on the other branch will then switch to the longer one. They will switch to the longer one because they're losing money. This is how the network operates. This is the governance model. This is all defined very clearly. I'm not going to sit by and let us all argue that a split in BCH makes any sense or that it's how Bitcoin should ever be governed. Don't say, and that's fine, call yourself something different, I want Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin. I want this governance model defining Bitcoin. And that's the BCH I'm behind. And maybe Omri wants something different. And he created the coin. That's fine. But it's not his. It's not his. It's the network. If he's working on Bitcoin, this is the network. So and so to make things just hone it home again, I know in order for SPV to work, it has to look to the longest chain. You can get by querying network nodes until you're convinced you have the longest chain, and therefore the valid chain. Sorry, Jonald. Valid chain. And finally, in the conclusion, nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. They can vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of valid blocks by working on extending them and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them. Any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. If anyone is arguing that November should be decided by anything but this consensus mechanism, I would be very, very wary of them, is all I'm saying. That's all there's to it.
So tune in next week to Hash Wars,
Woo.
episode 2.
Perfect. I think we can leave it there. I think the point is there, right? And to be very clear, Chris Passia, he wrote something very much disagreed upon. We're gonna try and get him on, but again, we mentioned at the beginning, it's tough. We have busy schedules, and we're trying to get content out once a week that aren't just like, you know, if we do that with Chris, that's a whole week, which is cool, but it's just like
right.
we have other stuff we're trying to cover, like these Whitepaper Series and that kind of stuff. So Chris will.
I just want to make sure that we have different types of shows too, you know, to cover everything. Because in that poll that we put on, it seemed like everybody wanted everything.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But
anyway.
Yeah, we want to make sure that, you know, other people's opinions are heard, and because like, obviously, you know, on the show, we're only kind of stating our opinions. We usually kind of agree on the same things for the most part. But, you know, obviously we want to make sure that, you know, because I like Chris a lot too.
Yep.
To be honest, I was kind of shocked a little bit about that article that he wrote. But would love to hear his opinion on it. So we'll definitely try and get him on here soon.
But yeah, hey, this is Bitcoin though. This is fun, right? This is where
this is fun. We're having fun. Have you seen that Family Guy quote talking about golf?
Yeah.
It's golf. Why'd you hit it in the water? We're having fun. This is fun. Golf's fun.
It'll be good.
This is Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's good. So yeah, next week we'll continue the Whitepaper series. We'll splice that out of this one and release that as like a separate playlist on our channel. And then we'll show ourselves here, like, subscribe. We never tell people to do that, but
yeah,
that helps us out.
Subscribe. Please. Please. I beg of you.
So exciting stuff coming up, but we'll leave it there for now. So
yeah, I think we have some exciting stuff coming up. So all right. Well, we'll leave it there. Right. Have a good night, good day, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
Beach Boys rolling out.